So you will recall the stages of psychosocial development. This is Erikson's work, and we always study Erikson in developmental psych, so I'm sure most of you have had it. So he offers us a model that we'll just cover a bit briefly. He says that each stage of life has a different crisis that must be resolved. And so in infancy, we must resolve the crisis of trust versus mistrust. That is, are our parents responding to us in appropriate ways, letting us know that we can trust others in our world? And if not, we develop a sense of distrust or mistrust and may have difficulty attaching to other people. Once we resolve this, hopefully we resolve it, then we come to autonomy versus shame and doubt. And autonomy is the sense of ourselves as independent agents who can act on our own. And if we're always suppressed by that, we don't develop a sense of autonomy. We may develop doubt or hesitancy in our actions and not develop a strong foundation for agency. And this agency emerges in the preschool stage. Autonomy, toileting is one big example of this, but also things like, does the child have a choice at all about what coat to wear or what book to read before bed? All those are small examples of autonomy as well, that the parent grants the child to give them a sense of themselves. And so following that, the child reaches the preschool years, and what they would be resolving is initiative versus guilt. And by initiative, we mean moving forward in an action, like having an idea and acting on it, like sitting down at the table without telling mom and dad and drawing a picture of a heart and giving it to grandma. That's taking initiative. And if that is suppressed, if the child's initiative, say the child takes the initiative to help wash the dishes and gets water all over, if the parent suppresses that, then this child may emerge with guilt, which is another sense of lack of agency, a lack of feeling that one is worthy. In elementary school, a child deals with whether they learn that their work is good, industry, that they can work hard and get good results. And that is reinforced, of course, in schoolwork. Do they do good work in school and receive that approval from teacher and parents? It also might emerge in chores. When they're given a chore, are they capable? Can they do the chore well and contribute to the family? And so all of these things are examples of work paying off, and the opposite. If their industry doesn't pay off, if every time they work hard and do something, then the parent comes in and corrects it and does it differently, they might develop a sense of inferiority. And we'll continue on a bit. During the adolescent years, the job, according to Erikson, is to establish a sense of identity. That is, who are you and where do you fit into the world? And this is hopefully resolved by the child, the teenager now, exploring different aspects of the self, having that opportunity to explore, figuring out what their skills and attributes are, and having encouragement as they discover their true self and their contributions, not the contributions the parents impose on them, but their own. Excuse me, I had to cough, and when I have to cough, it eliminates. When I pause the recording, it comes into this reduced view, and I'm going to just continue regardless, because otherwise I have to say all of that all over again and my voice is tired. So in young adulthood, we have intimacy versus what we would say isolation. The role is to find their relations with others, their intimate families. Perhaps they're a long-term mate, or perhaps the set of friends and family in which they're going to embed and feel confident and safe. If that doesn't happen, then a young adult might be isolated and alone. And we're going to stop here because I want to make the point that all of these are building on each other. So if there is a failure at the trust versus mistrust level, say abuse or neglect, then the child will probably be challenged in the next levels in developing a sense of autonomy. They don't trust others. How can they act independently? One of their foundational principles is challenged. They don't trust others. Maybe we don't really see an impact all the way until this stage, intimacy versus isolation, and maybe this child has trouble forming relationships. So this building process is why these are diaphyses. So there may be a challenge at these very early beginning levels of development, but then later on they emerge to create problems. Problems finding oneself. If one has a pattern of inferiority, guilt, shame, and doubt, then it's going to be hard for them to take agency and find out who they are and what they contribute. Now, Sullivan also offers a developmental framework, but it is a little more embedded within the social reactions. So whereas Erikson places much of these developmental frameworks on like it's an individual process, Sullivan pays more attention to the role of the interactions. And so he says the primary conflict throughout our lives is to be secure. And the opposite of that is being anxious. And anxious is one of the most aversive feelings. It's a significant challenge. We catch it from our caregivers. If they're anxious about something, we become anxious. And we also know we're also anxious ourselves, and we fear rejection, and we need security above all. So this is Sullivan's perspective. And so he says we are motivated, either this tension between us, it's almost like an id-ego kind of tension, pursuit of satisfaction, having our basic needs met, versus pursuit of security, getting approval from others. And the things that others approve really differ. Getting what we want versus getting approval. And so that's the tension. And so the goal is to reduce this tension all the time. How can we both be satisfied and secure? And so then we develop a sense of good me and bad me, depending on what is approved in our little worlds. And then we develop the traits that are good and reject those deemed bad. And that's all for the sense of resolving this conflict and reducing anxiety, which is such an aversive state. Now, don't worry too much about this. The main thing that I wanted to point out here, don't worry about paradoxical integrations and all that, is that Sullivan says that individuality, no, he rejects that. He says we're not products of personality or genetics, but we're products of responses to social approval. And so all of our reactions are engaged to elicit reactions. So it's like this back and forth. And so if we have challenges with this, then these action-reaction combinations become rigid and dominate an adult's thinking patterns so that they cannot develop and blossom. And then we also have these distortions where we judge inaccurately what other people perceive, and then we come to fulfill expectations that are not present. So this is Sullivan's stages, very similar to Erikson's. So he says, well, in infancy, the infant is developing characteristics already by what the need for contact and tenderness, which is a need. And so the source is the mother and the caregivers. So what behavior must the infant display in order to elicit this tenderness? And so for some mothers, they need to just cry a very little bit. The mother is there, present, responding appropriately. In other cases, maybe that child needs to really wail and scream in order to get attention and to get that care that they need. And so those traits are the traits that they're being developed, the traits of being very demanding, the traits of being self-centered, the traits of thinking that all their needs will be met immediately because they just deserve it. And you can see how these can then just step one step further and develop into distorted personalities or psychopathology. And he says that in early childhood, there's a need for adult participation, for the parent to play and engage with the child. And the primary source that's important is how the parents and siblings are responding. So how does the toddler, the young child, get the adult to participate? Is it by, say, being tough and fighting? Well, then that will be reinforced. Is it by some sort of artistic thing or by learning to read? Then that's what's going to be reinforced. How are sibling things handled by the parents, and how do siblings treat the child? So all of these factors shape the child. And in middle childhood, the peers, the recess friends, these are the source of approval that becomes very important. There's a need for this child to be accepted. So what characteristics are nurtured by the peer group? Who is the peer group? How does the child need to behave in order to get along at recess? That's a challenging time for children. And so we look at all of those things. So again, we're just setting the diatheses. I won't continue with all of this because it's not that relevant, but you can just see how the social framework sets the diathetical stage. And I'm not going to make that point. Now finally, Bowlby says that we need to be attached to other people, and there's abundant evidence that we need physical contact as infants and that we need a sense of trust in our caregivers. And he talks about how we need to have proximity maintenance, that if someone is healthily attached, they're going to want to be near the attachment figure. In childhood, this might be the caregiver. And in adulthood, this might be your significant others, but you'll want to be near the people who you're attached to. Safe haven is another component of attachment. That is, when you're stressed or frightened, you want to seek out your attachment figure. So in a child, you can see the child falls down and gets hurt and runs to mama. And in an adult, you have a little fender bender, you're a little stressed out. Who do you call? Those are your attachment figures. Hopefully you all have some. Separation distress is the tendency to feel and express distress when the attachment figure departs. And this in infancy is, of course, the mom goes to work and the infant feels distressed. And in adulthood, you know, your significant other, your partner, your spouse is going to go abroad for 6 months and you might feel distress. And finally, secure base, the tendency to explore new things and feel more relaxed, confident, and playful when the attachment figure is present and available. And this would be called secure base. And so this means that you know you're loved, you know you're accepted, you're confident in that, and so you can go and explore the world and take chances and play and be light and have fun. Now, if these aren't present for the young child, they don't develop the characteristics of healthy attachment. And in this case, they might have difficulty forming adult relations. They might have great anxiety. And all of these things can form a diathetical foundation for the development of a disorder.